Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Joining us right now for the half hour, David Rosenberg of Rosenberg Research in Toronto. I need to explain this to people that what is so important with David Rosenberg is the heritage where you stole Merrill Lynch research for no other reason. A guy named Farrell and a guy named Rosenberg. He's continued that tradition. And if you steal David Rosenberg's research now, it's about the reasserting of a deflationary or disinflationary trend. David, do you once again just say the permanence here is towards lower interest rates?
I do believe that. Wouldn't surprise me if the Fed engages in what people would call a hawkish cut on December 18th, signal a pause, and probably the dot plots will go from 4 cuts to 2, and then we go to March, and I believe the data will then push them back to predicting 4 cuts from 2. So these dot plots move around a lot because the Fed is just basically operates on a contemporaneous basis. But I do believe that the trend in rates will be lower. And I think that the trend in inflation is going to be lower. And I think that, the one thing that I'm confident of more now than I was even a few weeks ago is that we're not going to be seeing the big tariff hikes that were being pledged during the campaign. It's very clear just early on before Trump's taken office, and we've seen how he's handled Mexico and Canada, that the tariffs are really being used as a weapon to achieve, other security goals. I don't think we're going to get the big tariff increases. I think that, the economics team he's put together has been pretty impressive. I think they're going to encourage Trump to resist those temptations for a global trade war, big tariff increases. And then what's left is going to be deficit reduction, and that's not going to come from the president, but it's going to come from Congress.
David,
we're going to get deregulation and more oil production.
David, let me go to the heart of the matter.
I find it very difficult to believe that we're going to generate an inflation cycle out of those developments.
David, the heart of the matter is that we had a triple stimulus out of the pandemic. A question that many people ask. Is the American exceptionalism, is the American boom in productivity nothing more than a follow-on of a unique stimulus that austere Europe didn't do?
Well, the productivity side really comes from the supply side of the economy, not the demand side. So there was really nothing, I don't think, that we can point to stimulus being the driver of productivity. Curiously enough, what COVID managed to do, and that's the reason why productivity growth has been surprisingly strong, is we came out of COVID with a productivity shift to the upside. And the one sector, actually, that has led the growth in productivity has not been technology or finance. It's actually been the retail sector, because during the pandemic and the lockdowns and the aftermath, if you didn't digitize your business and follow the Amazon model as a retailer, you're going to go out of business. So even before what's happened on the AI side, which the markets certainly believe that this is going to be a productivity game changer, and it probably will be, the post-COVID environment actually generated this sort of productivity improvements that Jay Powell has been talking about. They're real. And then the question is going to be, for the next 5 or 10 years, what will this model shift from the inflection point on the technology curve going to do to productivity in the future? And I will actually tip my hat to the bulls who say that this is going to be a game changer.
David, the Federal Reserve appears to be focusing on the labor market here. We got initial jobless claims today, a little bit higher than expectations. What's your view of the U.S. labor market, given that the Fed is really looking at it?
The way I would describe it is cooling, but not contracting. Even if we get the consensus estimate of, call it, close to 200,000 tomorrow, in the context of what happened in October, that leaves you with an average of about 100,000. So the trend is cooling off. I expect that will continue. And like most of the other parts of the economic pie, the incoming data have just been so confusing. You get the numbers from JOLTS, and they show openings up, but hiring's down. You get the ADP number out, and the ADP showed that hiring amongst large businesses surged, but yet small companies, which are really in the weeds of the economy, a lot more than big companies, small companies on net have let people go in 3 of the past 4 months. I read the Beige Book yesterday, and I'm shrugging my shoulders as to how Jay Powell can talk about the economy being strong when the Beige Book itself had about 250 references to the economy either being slightly growing, modestly growing, or just outright weak. Only 29 times was the word strong used in the Beige Book in a 51-page document, to which I say, Mr. Powell, if you're going to spend all the time, resources, and money on the Beige Book, why don't you at least listen to it? What was very striking in the Beige Book, and I would still say it's qualitative, it's not quantitative, but it's not revised. It just gets updated every 6 weeks. And I don't know if you guys went through it. I went through it tooth and nail because that's what I have to do. It's not the most pleasurable read in the world. The labor market, there were elements that improved in the past 6 weeks. Overall economic activity, yes. The consumer, yes. But funny enough, the labor market was downgraded. And there were numerous comments on how wage growth is cooling. So how do you get wage growth cooling in a labor market that everybody thinks is tight or tightening? So again, we just are riddled with all these anomalies and inconsistencies. But I would say that if you want to trend out the data, labor market not contracting yet, but it is cooling off.
Okay, David, one final question quickly here. It is the Rosenberg bull market. Can you own stocks here, David Rosenberg?
Well, I'm having my own epiphany right now on this topic because, let's face it, it was the best year for the stock market since 2019. I'm not alone. The consensus at the end of last year for the end of this year for the S&P 500 was 4,900, and we've just blown through 6,000. I think that there's a couple of things that are happening that should have you feeling bullish. It's not. I'm still concerned over market positioning, and sentiment is off the charts, and I am expecting a near-term correction. The question is, which would be normal, is what you do if we get the dip. And I think that you'd want to buy the dip. And I say that because, I've been calling this a bubble for a while, but it's maybe a bubble if you look at trailing P multiples or 1-year forward P multiples. But if in fact we've had an inflection point on the technology curve, if we've had a model shift when it comes to what AI is going to deliver in terms of future profitability and productivity, I'm thinking that the market is sending you a message that that investors have basically lengthened their time horizons. So all the classic valuation metrics that I've been using, I'm not going to say they're obsolete, but they're probably just not relevant to today's backdrop. Right. So I would say that, I guess if you can want to color me probably more positive on the stock market on a secular basis, based on everything that I've seen this year in particular, then I would say that, expect a near-term correction. I think it would be normal considering the nosebleed levels we're at. However, I think it's a dip that you probably will want to buy.
David, we're out of time, but next time you're on, we want to talk to you about Canada as a 51st state. We'll have to see how that goes. David Rosenberg's with Rosenberg Research.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Now is almost an annual thing that we do. At the end of the year, we try to just stop and talk about the emotion that all of us face. At the absolute minimum, gold is a cultural lodestone back to pre-biblical times. Gold is something different. It's something very different, Paul, at the corner of 57th Street and 5th Avenue. All four corners, you can enjoy gold. And without question, the one that holds the high ground on this is the Hong Kong and Shanghai banking corporations. James Steele is absolutely definitive. Is the price of gold, I think of Bitcoin and the madness of 100,000, has the price of gold this year detached from the microeconomics of gold or the industrial jewelry use of gold?
Well, certainly, and thank you for having me, Tom. Certainly, if you were to look at the underlying physical demand, that is what's absorbed by retailers, bars, coins, small bars, coins, and jewelry, one would not expect gold to be up where we are now. But gold is a hybrid of macroeconomic and geopolitical factors, plus those micro ones. And what's been propelling gold this year has been, well, primarily geopolitical risk. Risk of all kinds, actually.
Who's buying gold? Is it the Chinese central bank? Is it Chinese individuals? Is it the United States? Who's buying this stuff?
China and India, where 50% of all the physical gold demand in the world lies,
really?
Has been, yes, and 50% of jewelry as well.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't want to keep repeating 50%, but 50% of all gold demand is in jewelry, physical demand, and 50% of all gold demand, including jewelry, is bought in China and India. So they are massive importers, and they have cooled in recent months. We had a jump in India in August because they reduced the tariffs, but that was pretty much a one-off. And we know by looking at the Mumbai discount premium to London and the Shanghai premium or discount to London that demand is soft. So who's buying it then? That's investors who are not buying jewelry, not necessarily buying coins or small bars. They're buying large bars or they're buying on the over-the-counter market. These are asset managers, hedge funds, commodity trading advisors, because they've been getting positive technical signals. And we shouldn't forget the people that really helped kick the whole gold rally off. Central bank demand is not at the red-hot levels of last year or the year before, but it's still substantial.
How do you think about gold in the context of Bitcoin? Again, as Tom mentioned, we've got Bitcoin now over $100,000 per token. I mean, what's the relationship there, if any, from your perspective?
Well, I think you have to ask. You have to ask yourself, what is the nature of these two instruments, and why do we buy gold versus something else? Well, you buy gold for the physicality. You're able to touch it. You're able to store it. We'll store it for you,
yes,
or other
will.
bullion banks will store it for you.
Which we still need a tour of your vault there.
It's difficult these days.
Is it? Okay.
Need to know basis.
Need to know basis. Okay.
And we do have a substantial vault operations globally, and the difference between gold. One of the differences between gold and Bitcoin is you can hold gold, you can have it.
Yep.
Also, it's the longevity, and I'm not a plus or a negative on the Bitcoin front. I'm agnostic, but gold has a long history of being an excellent portfolio diversifier.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons that central banks want it.
James Steele, a delicate question. I don't want you to get in trouble with the general counsel, who I'm sure is tuned in to this conversation at HSBC. But the basic idea, and the FT and also the Wall Street Journal had this really serious money laundering acquisitions, with Tether being the Bitcoin stablecoin currency of choice, if you will, in the digital world. Is gold used for money laundering? It's like too heavy, right?
Yes, effectively.
There's not a criminal tone within the greater gold universe.
No, and here's where, the London Bullion Market Association, headed by Ruth Kroll, has really been excellent. In this, for sourcing gold, where does it come from? Making sure that it's not being mined in places that are exploiting the population, tracking it. We only accept London Bullion Market good delivery, as would any other bullion bank.
Right.
And so therefore, it's just not. It's also not as easy to steal it. It's not like the movies where you see all these blokes throwing gold into the back of a van after they've broken into something. It is dense and it is heavy.
Yeah, okay, this is great. James Steele, thank you so much. An annual visit of the
back,
state of gold.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Joining us right now, thrilled, and I'm really honored that we could have him today, is someone with a global perspective. His initial acclaim with the Bush senior administration on Northern Ireland, Richard Haas, of course, I'm going to say really the reinvigoration of the Council on Foreign Relations. He is with Centerview. Ambassador Haas, thank you for joining us. I think we forget that Seoul, Korea is 35 miles from the demilitarized zone, the DMZ. How does the tension of North Korea and South Korea fold into the shock of government collapse and test in Seoul?
Good question, Tom. Good morning. I think the issue is whether North Korea, which is obviously watching what's going on in South Korea with, say, more than a little interest, whether they see this as a moment of some opportunity. North Korea remains the most militarized country in the world. You've got two large conventional armies arrayed against each other. You still have more than 20,000 American troops there. North Korea obviously also has a missile and a growing nuclear force. So that's the danger here, that they would see this as some a moment of opportunity to exploit. And I would expect and hope that South Korean and U.S. forces would be at a higher level of alert just to try to deter any such thing.
June of 2019, President Trump meets Kim Jong-un. We all remember that moment. What if that happens again? What is a signal to South Korea if the president-elect reduxes June of 2019?
Look, the South Korean relationship with President Donald Trump was one of the worst relations between an American ally and the United States. The president really pushed hard about why wasn't South Korea doing more to pay for U.S. troops there, concerns about the trade imbalance and so forth. So much, and by the way, and threatened to pull U.S. forces out of South Korea. So if he were to once again ratchet up the pressure, I think the most likely reaction would be that South Korea would think very seriously indeed about developing nuclear weapons of its own if it came to lose faith in the United States. And that's the sort of thing that, among other things, could cause a real crisis with China. So there's a lot of potential dynamics here.
Richard, how concerned should the average American be, or the average just observer in the West be, about South Korea? This martial law news over the last couple of days really caught, I think, everybody by surprise. How concerned should we be about the stability of that part of the world?
It did catch everybody by surprise, including everybody in South Korea. The good news is it went nowhere. You had the declaration of martial law. The National Assembly met almost immediately, repudiated, public opinion repudiated it. The president backed down very quickly. So to me, the larger story is a good one about the resilience of South Korean democracy and institutions some 40 plus years since South Korea joined the ranks of the democracy. So I don't think we should be concerned. I actually think the big loser here is President Yoon, and he'll obviously face now an impeachment challenge. And I'm not sure if he survives what he set in motion. He was unpopular before this. He's far more unpopular now.
Right.
He's lost a lot of legitimacy. But I actually think it's a good day for South Korean democracy.
It is not a quiet December. We welcome all of you across the nation. Your morning commute, Bloomberg Surveillance. Too much international relations, it seems. We're focused on Paris and, of course, on what we see in Seoul. And with us, Richard Haas. Coming up, Audrey Child-Friedman and the currency markets. And we're looking forward to economic data here in 20 minutes. Paul?
Richard, let's move over to what we're seeing in Ukraine here. Boy, there's so many dynamics here, so many ebbs and flows here with the incoming U.S. administration here. How do you think this is going to play out over the coming months in Ukraine?
Actually, uncharacteristically, and I hope you're all sitting down there, upbeat. I actually think over 2025, while the battlefield will continue, I think attention's going to move to the negotiating table. The person Donald Trump has appointed, Keith Kellogg, retired Army general. He was Mike Pence's national security advisor, but he's been appointed to be the point man for Ukraine and Russia. What he's recently written about the subject, I find incredibly sensible. Essentially, first going to Ukraine, saying we'll continue to provide arms, but you've got to be willing to negotiate in good faith and base the negotiation pretty much on a ceasefire in place. And I think the Ukraine government has come around to that, if you listen to what Mr. Zelensky's saying. And then the question is whether they can bring Russia around. But to me, it's all good news. There's a focus on negotiations. No one's talking about throwing Ukraine under the bus. And very quickly, I think the pressure is going to be on Vladimir Putin to meet Ukraine halfway. So I don't think it's crazy optimistic to say in 2025, by the end of that year, say a year from now, we could be seeing real progress diplomatically. I'm actually optimistic about it.
Richard, how would you characterize the relationship today with President-elect Trump and Putin? Is it going to be constructive? Can we move the ball forward on a number of issues? What's that relationship like?
It's the right question. The atmospherics have often been good. The substance, who knows? Look, you've got Ukraine. That'll be probably the first early test. We'll see if Mr. Trump can persuade Putin to dial down his relationship with North Korea. That'll be a second test. A year after Donald Trump resumes his presidency, goes and re-enters the Oval Office, the New START arms control framework is set to expire. So we're going to learn there as well. Can the Trump administration and Putin, can they extend the nuclear arms agreements that have been so central to international stability? So there's any number of issues. So I'm not in the predictions business, and I don't think there's any way of knowing. But we're going to have some pretty early indications, beginning with Ukraine.
Richard Haas, I look at your work with the Council on Foreign Relations and your ability to write prodigiously about this. Let us stop and go back to really an important work. Foreign policy begins at home. How are we doing, Richard Haas? How are we doing in building out our domestic structure to project internationally?
Tom, if I were still a professor, I'd give us a pretty low grade. I'm not sure I'd give us a passing grade. We're extraordinarily divided, which makes it increasingly difficult to be consistent and reliable, either for our friends or against our foes. We're also been unsuccessful at tackling many of our domestic challenges. Just take two. One is the border situation. And if people in this country see real problems here at home, they don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the focus on the rest of the world. The other something you talk a lot about on your program here, which is the deficit and debt. And again, we'll see whether we have the collective will to tackle that. It's interesting, the numbers that have brought down the French government, running a deficit to GDP ratio of about 6 or so percent. Guess what? That's where we are. And our cumulative debt is essentially now equal to our GDP. Yeah. So we're in serious water. So I think there's real issues about our focus, our political consensus, and also just the resource availability for the United States to play the kind of role in the world that we have for 80 years now, and that I would argue has served us and the world pretty well.
You were a young lad at Obermann. There's a photo out of Paul Sweeney of Barnier. I think he couldn't shave, he was so young, in Pompidou, which harkens back to folks in 1962 and the collapse of another French government. Richard Haas, a question I asked our Stephen Carroll earlier, should we get ready for a sixth French Republic?
Good question, but the problems to me aren't so much mechanical, Tom, as political. So you have the left and the right voting down the prime minister. And all this comes against the backdrop of, I think, Macron mishandling French politics, calling for snap elections when they are unlikely to result in anything good. But the real question is, what is the left and the right willing to vote for? So the issue is not just Barnier. The issue is not mechanical like it was with the Fourth Republic. The real question to me is, is, do you have a consensus in France to take some difficult decisions about spending, taxation, and the rest? Sounds familiar, I expect. And I don't think that can be fixed mechanically with rewriting the rules of French politics. And you couldn't rewrite the rules in any case quickly enough or get approval of them. There's no figure like a de Gaulle who could ram it through the French political system. So I think we're pretty much stuck with the Fifth Republic.
Thank you so much for the time. Richard Haas, of course, with Centerview Partners. Can't say enough about his work with the Council on Foreign Relations and Foreign Affairs magazine as well.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg terminal.
Right now, with a window into your Washington, Professor Schiller joins from Brown University. Wendy, I look at the zeitgeist out of Washington, and it seems like a Senate ascendant, a Senate trying to find their place within this era of executive power. Do you sense that the Senate is gaining traction in what they want to do in this new mix?
Well, I think Tom and Paul, good morning, and Lisa, and John again. I think that it really makes you think about the majorities. So 53-47 doesn't sound like a lot, but it's just enough to give John Thune, who's the Republican leader, who'll be the Republican leader after January 3rd, enough room, Tom, to sort of negotiate with Trump on one side and a fractious Senate Republican Party on the other. And that's the difference that a 51-49 versus 53-47 makes. And the House, I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything, which is of concern because constitutionally they are the originators of tax and trade bills. So this makes you nervous that the majority could, on a bad day for Republicans, not exist in the House. So all eyes on John Thune right now.
Professor Schiller, I think so important here to those of us not expert is what are the consequences? So Murkowski and Collins of Maine, they're in the Trump timeout chair. I get that. Collins Appropriations Committee chairman to be, I believe. What are the consequences to a given senator who joins Murkowski and Collins pushing against the president-elect? Are they not invited to the Christmas party? I mean, what are the consequences?
Tom, it's primary challenges. I mean, Trump is riding probably the highest level of approval he's ever had. And I think now's in a position where he can say, I'm going to anoint this person to run against you. Joni Ernst in Iowa. That's who I'm looking at, particularly on the Hegseth nomination, because she's up in 26 in Iowa. And, she had a sort of closer race last time, but I think, she's probably expected to win pretty easily if Trump doesn't find somebody else to run against her in the primary. So I think that's what these senators are worried about. But if 3 Republican women come out and say they can't vote for Hegseth, then I don't think it survives. So I think this is where it's important to have the numbers in each of these cabinet nominations in terms of objecting to what Trump wants.
So to what extent, I guess, Professor, do you think the Senate will challenge or put up some roadblocks for some of the more contentious nominees here, Mr. Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and some others?
Well, Paul, I mean, I don't think they're in a position to really put up big roadblocks. I think they're just trying to stay on the road right now with Donald Trump and not get run off the road, and so that they can actually exercise their constitutional responsibility to even have confirmation hearings. It looks like they're getting through to that, which was in doubt like 2 weeks ago. But now it looks like they've said, look, we'll get it done, but give us our space to do this. And it looks like Thune is preserving that power, which strengthens Thune internally in the Senate. So how much will Trump or Trump's advisors let Thune be that strong? We're about to see that in the next couple of weeks.
What are you observing here on the summation of the of Matt Gaetz over to FBI? I have found as the amateur here, Professor Schiller, that the heat, the level against the FBI designate is just extraordinary. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge moment in American, law enforcement history, right? I wasn't alive to know J. Edgar Hoover, right? I ran FBI for, I think, at least 50 years or something. And he really, one could say, abused the power of the FBI. So it's taken a long time for the FBI to come back from that. And under Chris Wray, I think it's been restored a little bit. But this is, fiercely in the MAGA community, an anti-federal law enforcement ethos. So this is what Trump is playing to. And Trump himself probably does not have any love for the FBI. But the FBI does incredibly important work, particularly on terrorism, domestic and international, and other things. So I think the Senate wants to make sure there's a functioning FBI. So that's where this is a moment in time and history for federal law enforcement. And it could be severely weakened and undermined. I don't think that's what most senators want.
Professor, the first 100 days of any incoming administration are absolutely critical. What do you expect this administration to really focus on the first 100 days?
Typically, Paul, I would agree with you. I'd say 100 days really matters to Donald Trump. One thing, it's his second term, not his first. So I don't know that it's that crucial, this 100-day marker. It's also Donald Trump, and the power he wields among his voters, his supporters, is something we haven't seen in a long time in terms of reverse pressure on Congress. So I think that power lasts, for a while, well beyond 100 days, as long as the economy keeps looking like it's getting better and inflation stays stable. If the economy does not stay stable and inflation does tick up, then I think that popular support for Trump erodes and his clout with Congress erodes in a proportion to that.
So what are the next mileposts that we need to be focused on, Professor, here between now and Inauguration Day for President-elect Trump and his administration?
I think the reaction to his nominees is very important. I think that he's making more foreign trips. This was a guy who didn't really like to cross the pond. Now he's going to France to go to Notre Dame for its opening. He seems like he now wants to be, forgiven, so to speak, or accepted into the international club. And I think we're going to see some developments, even though he's not even president yet, on foreign policy. He's going to want to be the guy that solves Russia-Ukraine and solves the Middle East, because what's left to do? And he can show up Biden in that respect. So I do think you're going to see a bigger shift, a bigger set of attentions paid to foreign policy for Trump, and starting now with some of these international trips.
Wendy Schiller, thank you so much.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Your daily look at the front page is the Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa?
Oh, Tom, I know you love your bow ties, but this story stood out to me because of you. The necktie making an office comeback. This was in the Wall Street Journal. Yes. This is a place where you see the dress sneakers.
Yes.
Always talks about. Everybody's wearing
Even
sneakers.
David Weston went to the dress
sneakers.
That just crushed me.
Yes. But who is wearing the necktie? So apparently it's the 20-something crowd. Like a lot of the interns are coming in. They want to make an impression. They say it helps show their personality, gives them confidence. But women also getting in on the action.
Nope.
It commands a room. That's what they say. It starts a conversation. It's becoming like the hot accessory, like shoes or jewelry. So now the women have neckties. But some saying that sometimes they're more decked out than the boss is. The boss comes in, dressed cash and the sneakers and everything.
Bow ties?
And not bow ties, neckties. No. The actual long necktie.
I haven't worn one since time began. We just had a meeting, and we're dressed to the nines, and the guy walks in, and he's like San Francisco Cash.
Yeah.
And this is dead on, that there's like bouncing cultures going on.
It's all started with the dot-com boom in the late 90s. That's when I sensed it.
Yes.
And for a couple of years, I did go casual. But then,
did you?
Then the market crashed in 2000. And let's get back to work now.
You go cash here when you're working a 3-day week in the summer.
Yep.
You're wearing Dior.
Of course.
You're wearing Montclair.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, the pandemic kind of sparked that cash thing too, because of work from home, and then some people slowly transitioned to dressing nicer. But
my clothes icon, Damien Sassower.
Oh.
Everything he wears, I'm taking.
Patagonia.
Next.
Exactly.
Okay. Taylor Swift. Remember the concert book that came out in Target on Black Friday? Well, apparently it did really well. Circana Bookscan said it sold 814,000 copies the first 2 days. The only one to beat it is actually former President Barack Obama's A Promised Land. But think about it. His book was sold at all major retailers. Swift's only exclusively at Target. So just at Target alone, she sold that many. But the Wall Street Journal also points to experts who say artists really need to take out a page out of that book, because when it comes to concerts, they need to follow the success story that she's done. Like, she's popularized a long concert. I mean, hers are 3 hours, 15 minutes plus.
What's the shortest Bruce concert you've ever been to?
Like again,
3.5
hours.
It does go that long.
Don't give me the
and he's
shit
73.
that.
Yeah.
Did you say the statistic was 800,000?
814,000 copies.
When Alexander Hamilton came out, Ron Chernow, I interviewed him, the great Ron Chernow. Yep. He single-handedly changed the publishing business when he sold over 300,000 hardcovers of Alexander Hamilton. So think about that. He changed the business with 300,000 plus. And here's Swift doing 800,000.
Everything she touches.
I'm telling you.
Gold.
But also the things she does, like for the concerts, to get people. Like they say, artists need to think, attract more women, because you had the mothers and the daughters who attended together. You had the DIY bracelets. That's another thing. Yeah. Mini residencies. You know how she does the longer stays? That's like another big thing. That
Surveillance note, we remember our key interview, foundational interview with Amy Wu Silverman.
Yes.
Her daughter Taylor waved at them.
Yes.
Wow. I just bought tickets. I just bought tickets for the Eagles at the Sphere in Vegas for April.
Ooh.
How about that?
Nice.
That was an impulse purchase that I sometimes regret.
Impulse purchase?
Yes, that may have been done in the evening after a couple of cocktails.
This is not off Redo, keeper of the Amex.
No,
right?
this is not Redo's not paying for this.
Very cool. Vince Gill's out with him now.
Yeah, is that right?
Okay,
Cool.
Vince Gill's
very
out
good.
with him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
There's some real history.
Well, after a few cocktails, I purchased Zach Bryan country tickets for my daughter.
There you go.
At MSG. I regret that kind of now. But anyway, they cost me a lot.
The cocktails are dangerous.
Yes, they are.
It's all about the experiences now, Lisa. It's not about goods and services. It's about the
I
experiences.
know.
That's
She's
what
picking out her country outfits already.
Right.
Next we got Business Insider. They had this report on how important influencers, those affiliate marketers, have become for Cyber Monday.
Yeah, like John Tucker.
No, not exactly, but Adobe Analytics said they drove about 20% of U.S. Cyber Monday revenue. How they do it, they post these affiliate links. That's how they make their money, because that link is linked to their, and that's how, depending on the commission they make, that's what it goes by. So they're saying a lot more people click on the links than just regular posts. So they're saying these affiliate marketers are the ones that are really starting to push these online sales, especially through social media.
Well,
they're making
I'm from
money
the time
doing
you just
it.
bought a 30-second spot on radio or TV, and that's how you.
Nope. Now these big companies are going to the influencers.
Tom could be an
He
influencer,
could.
I think.
We can make that happen.
Yeah.
I don't,
Tang.
Go to your
how
favorite
much is the
cognac
commission?
You could be sponsored by Tang.
Yes.
Finally, there's been a change. Cognac champagne makers, they're looking to boost their U.S. exports ahead of Trump's been talking about tariffs for different countries.
Tariffs,
Yes. I mean, France has not been part of that, but you have companies like LVMH cognac brand Hennessy. Sources saying they're increasing consignments to the U.S. following Trump's victory. They want to do the same with Moet champagne. But about 27 million champagne bottles were shipped to the U.S. last year. So now they're saying that you're starting to see a shift, and companies are going to likely redirect those bottles, even that would have gone to China. So there might be a shift.
She's such a hitter.
Yep.
Do you see how she pronounces Moet correctly?
Moet.
It's not Moet.
I would have gone Moet.
It's Moet.
I don't know.
It's because they're from Eastern France and they pronounce like accents.
Oh, is that right?
See?
It's like, they regional accents.
I thought it was a Brooklyn thing.
So
exactly.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much. Lisa Mateo with our newspapers. We do it each and every day.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.